All right, in this video I'm going to talk about the forward fold. This is basic, of course, because it's just folding over, and the idea is that you fold over, you're able to touch your toes or touch the floor, even better. And it seems like a very obvious thing, and it seems like a very basic thing, but this is one of those things that people come to yoga for. I mean, it's a good marker of flexibility. Can I touch the floor? Can I actually put my hands on my toes? There's a few things to think about if you've had trouble with this sort of thing. It's not just about being flexible necessarily. Some of it's about the tightness in the hamstrings, and that's the usual issue that people come to, especially when people come to yoga from things like running or certain sorts of activities like that will tighten up the back line of your leg. The other thing is having the core control to actually control the movement of your pelvis. Basically having the bracing through your midsection, through the belly, around the ribs, to tilt your pelvis forward as you're folding. And coming into a full forward fold, keep in mind, you want to be able to control the movement of the pelvis. So when I bring this forward, I have my core engaged, I'm hinging from the hips, I'm not rounding my spine at all. So I'm actually trying to press my low back forward, almost moving into the arch of my back and maintaining a back bend. Now as I bring this down low, as my core is engaged and my pelvis tilts forward, my hamstrings lengthen out and they start to relax. And I can actually bring this down, so that my belly touches my thighs. And at some point, of course, there's going to be some rounding in here, but I'm still actively pulling down, trying to bring my belly to my thighs, bringing my torso down to touch my thighs. And then I can come down to that full fold. Fingertips down, I can touch my feet. I can pull this even further in. And while I'm pulled in, keep in mind, this is all compacted, so my torso is actually touching my thighs. So I'm not really rounding my spine at all, and I'm actually hinging completely from the hips. Now, what happens with most people when the hamstrings are tight and they're not really bracing to come into this, the fold looks something like this. And there's sort of this candy cane shape where you have this rounding in your spine. So what happens is there's really no core control here, and there's not a lot of engagement at all from the upper body. And all the engagement is from the back of the legs, the hamstrings. And that is pulling the pelvis back, and as it pulls it back, it actually rounds your spine and keeps you from reaching down. Now, if you're in this position, you're in this sort of circumstance right now, and you have that sort of tightness, the first thing to do is let go of the legs. Go ahead, bend the knees. Let your belly touch your thighs and find that fold here as best you can. And you may have to bend down very deeply here, touch your belly to your thighs and let this go down. Go ahead and bring your fingertips down if you want to feel this out. And if you haven't really done this before, make this active, but take it back and forth. Pull the torso down to the thighs and then just straighten the legs as far as you can go without releasing that. And if you start to round, just stop and then come back in and keep taking this back and forth. Now, to feel this out, don't worry about straight legs so much. Even with bent knees, you'll probably still feel that stretch on the backs of the thighs and the belly muscle, and you want to tune into that, keep some tension, and keep your torso drawing down. Over time, stretching like this helps to basically lengthen out the back of the hip flexors and keep that engagement through your core. So you're active in the upper body, trying to get more passive in the lower body here. That's an oversimplification, but it's a good sort of way to frame it, keep in mind. And you find that when you're sitting down. Now, if you're coming into a full hamstring stretch, if your hamstrings are tight, doing this with two legs is going to be extremely difficult. So just like when I was standing, if I start to bring this forward, if I want to bring this to my own forward fold, and keep in mind I've been doing this for a while, so I can bring this down pretty flat, I actually have my feet flexed, which is going to tighten up the backs of my legs and pull on those muscles. And if they're really tight, then I'm not going to be able to fold, but they aren't that tight. They can actually relax even with my feet in this position. So I can bring this down, hinging from the hips, and keep in mind, I'm pressing my low back forward, staying long through my spine. And as I bring this down, I'm actively pulling my torso forward onto my thighs. This isn't just gravity here. And I'm extending out further and further, stretching long. And when I come down, I can bring my hands to the floor. I can hold onto my feet. My belly is still on my thighs. I can actually bring my chest down to my thighs and draw this in. Now, if you don't have this level of flexibility, you probably don't. You usually have to train this a little bit. You can back off again, bending the knees and bringing this to that double leg forward fold. Start to bring this in. Press your low back forward, touch your belly to your thighs. You can find some grip here and pull down even more. And right here I'm holding my shins. Maybe you hold the ankles. Maybe you bring the hands up to your feet. Maybe draw this forward, but still press your low back forward. Maybe just leave it right here. And keep in mind, I'm not passive at all. I'm not letting my spine round. I'm pulling my low back and my mid back forward to keep my spine extended and keep the pelvis tilted forward. And this is the best way to do this double leg. Now, if your hamstrings are really tight, it's actually much harder to stretch both legs at the same time than it is to go for just one. So rather than taking your regular forward fold, if you want to come into the stretch, you come into Janu Shirshasana. So one leg forward, one knee bent, sole of the foot as high up in the thigh as you're comfortable with. you turn toward that extended leg, fold about halfway down. And here again, you want to keep your core engaged, press the low back forward, and just bring your hands down. Feel this out from here and see how far you can take this. Now, if your belly doesn't touch your thigh already, or if you're already rounding your spine, then you definitely have to bend your knee, all right? And bring your torso to touch your thigh. Find that contact initially, still with the core engaged, trying to press your low back forward. And just like I did with 2 legs, you find that grip. Hold onto the shin, the ankle, the foot, whatever works. Pull yourself even further forward. Now, as I'm pulling myself forward here, I'm trying to keep as much of an arch in my spine as I can. Maybe press your heel forward and bring this down. Don't lose that contact, belly against the thigh. And you can stay at any point where you still feel the stretch and you're still drawing the torso forward at the same time. And you can go in and out of basically coming into maximum tension, then letting go a little bit. You may find over time while you take a longer hold, and I'm talking a minute to 2 minutes, maybe over that even if you really want to get deep with this. You'll be able to incrementally go just a little bit further and a little bit further, but you have to keep yourself relaxed and not take this to the point where it's too stressful, where if you come out, then maybe things start to seize up. So go slow in and go slow out. And maybe over time, you get to the point where you can keep your torso touching your thigh and bring this all the way down. Now, if you need to actually work this a little bit further, and keep in mind, coming into that forward fold, when you haven't really gotten that before, we can hold on to it and bring yourself all the way down. You have to figure out a way to strengthen the upper body, strengthen the mid-body, I should say, basically the midsection, and loosen up the hamstrings. And there's a few typical poses where you can do this in, and one of them is going to be like your basic pyramid shape. So here my hips are squared forward, so my feet are on 2 separate tracks. Both legs are straight. My right foot's forward, my left foot's back, and it's pointed out to the side about 45 degrees or so, and you can quibble about the angle. It doesn't really matter a whole lot. But be sure you can pull the front hip back and the back hip forward and keep that squareness. Now, you can always bend your knees a little bit if you need to, but here again, keep the engagement in your core. Press your low back forward, start to hinge this down. And as you're coming down, come halfway down. And see that you can hold this here. So this isn't about just coming into the stretch, and if your hamstring's tight, it's gonna look like this, and you're gonna come into that candy cane shape again. No good. Bring yourself about halfway down. Find this shape here and see if you can keep your spine long. Now, if this is already a massive stretch in that front leg, go ahead and put a little bend in the knee, but keep your hips squared. Just find the point where you can accommodate the tension, and then bring your belly down to touch your thigh. And you can hold from here. Now you can keep your hands on your hips. You can put one or both hands on that front leg. And it depends on how it's being taught in a class. You may have the whole thing with the fingertips coming down. You don't have to bring it all the way down, but find that engagement, touch your belly to your thigh. And if you're gonna take it deep, if you wanna take this to a fold and you don't have much flexibility, you may find that you're bending deeper and deeper into the knee to come down. But as long as you feel that stretch on the front leg, you're still keeping the hips square to the front. This is gonna be an effective stretch, keep in mind, or an effective position to be in. And it's actually a bit more of an active stretch, because you have to hold a lot of tension to stay in that shape, especially when your hamstrings are really tight. And that's one of the typical poses that you see. That's your basic pyramid stance. Now, another pose that will help out to open up the hamstrings is a Warrior 3. Now, Warrior 3 is a standing balance, and it's still a standing balance with the hips squared forward. So you're not opening the hips out to the side. So my left foot's going to be my base. I'm going to step my right foot back, just come onto the toes, keep the hips squared, and my hands on my hips so I can actually feel that here. Now, you can always bend in your base knee a little bit, keep in mind, but try to find as much straightness that leg as you can, and try to keep the lifted body as straight and long as possible. So as you hinge forward, you need to engage the glutes of the leg that starts to lift. Keep everything pulling forward. And then as you start to bring this in, if your hamstring's tight, you'll probably feel a stretch in the back of the leg already. You can stay right here. If you need to let it go a little bit, you can bend into the knee, but again, keep your core active. And then if you're gonna bring it down further, be sure you're lifting that back leg. And ideally, you have a straight base leg and the lifted body stays in one line. You can bring this to 90 degrees, and this is definitely a very good hamstring stretch right here. If you need to back off from it, bend the knee of the leg that you're standing on. And that's a little bit more muscular, keep in mind, but we'll relax some of the tension on the back of the leg to let you find the shape, so you can actually keep your core engaged and hold your balance there. A little bit more of an active stretch, and you won't often see something like this in a yoga class, but this is a good thing to basically prep yourself in the time you have before class, or maybe when we wake up in the morning, or if you're a runner. This is a very good stretch to start to get into your normal range of motion through your hamstrings, that you don't just start out tight, especially if you're starting early in the day. And this is basically with some active kicks. So from here, I'm going to put my weight on my left foot, step my right foot back, and now my right hand is forward just as a guide. So I just want to keep this visual. You want to keep your core engaged, keep your torso upright. And if your hamstrings are tight, you're going to kick your foot forward, but you're probably not going to come up that high. And that's no big deal. So you just bring it forward, and maybe it looks like this. All right, so my torso stays upright. I'm not rounding down to touch the leg, and if you do that, keep in mind you're losing all the benefit of doing this. You want to let the stretch come into the back of the leg that you're kicking, and keep everything else rigid and solid. If your hamstrings start to open up over time, you're going to find you're going to be able to bring this up, Torso still upright, so you're not rounding toward that lifted foot. You don't have to reach down. You can just bring it up and let it come toward your hand. And it's not about hitting the hand so much as it is about loosening up the leg with more of a dynamic motion. That's a good way to start things out. Probably the longer holds that you take, you'd want to take at the end of a more vigorous practice, like in a vinyasa class, or at the end of a run, or maybe at the end of the day before you go to sleep. But anyway, I hope that helps. Thank you.